Coming up on this episode of Across the Country with Amanda, I am diving into what I think is an underrated album from the late 90s, and it is one of the best from Martina McBride's catalog. It's called Emotion, and we're going to dive right into it. There was so much music released in 1999 and the early 2000s in country music, and I've always felt that this album wasn't necessarily lost in the shuffle, but maybe overshadowed commercially by other records. For me, I was 11 when I went to Kmart and got to buy this CD, and I love this album. Obviously, as a child, I loved the catchiness of I Love You. That was such a huge radio hit. But this album dug deeper than a lot of the things I was listening to on radio at that time. Sonically, it is pure perfection. The songs, they're all different in lyrical content and instrumentation, but it all blends flawlessly. This one, it's definitely a grown-up record with such a depth to it. So let's set the scene at this time in Martina's career. She has just came off her Evolution record, which was a triple platinum success. Martina's appearances were becoming the pinnacle of the award shows. Think back to 1998 when she was at the ACMs, she performed Broken Wing, and then in 1999, one of the performances I will never ever forget, Whatever You Say. These were such big moments. She was getting applause between the verses and all those lengthy, well-deserved standing ovations. And without getting too deep into the Evolution era, because let's face it, that is a whole episode in itself. I mean, that album, it had 5 singles, which all charted in the top 10. But this was a very important time for females in country music. There were 66 songs on the charts by women in 1999. 66. Yeah, that's a lot, and those were fantastic songs. You had Terry Clark, Jody Messina, The Chicks, Shelley Wright, Faith Hill, and Martina. They would all reach number 1 that year. Martina's Whatever You Say peaked at number 2 in early July, and that was the final single off her Evolution album. And by the end of that month, RCA, they had already released the lead single from her forthcoming album. She is coming off such a momentous album. This new single, though, it was about to take Martina McBride's career to a whole new level. The song I Love You was featured on the Runaway Bride soundtrack. That was the movie starring Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. And there was a really fun music video. It interspersed clips from the movie along with performances from Martina. And that movie went to number 1 at the box office during its opening weekend. And the soundtrack, it would go platinum. And soon after that, Martina McBride, she would have another number 1 hit. But this one, it was unlike anything in her career. The album Emotion, it was released on September 14th of 1999. Everything about this album was a little bit edgier than her previous releases. The cover art, it was fantastic, and it really helped usher in that millennium era of country music. This is when females were becoming more fashionable and they were letting their personalities really show. Martina had just done the now iconic Lilith Fair that Sarah McLachlan put on back in the 90s. And you could really tell that this album, it was influenced by that whole experience of being on that tour. In the early fall of 1999, Martina's song, I Love You, it is racing up the charts on country radio and on the adult contemporary charts. The album Emotion, it's released to strong first week sales. So the album comes out, and then 1 week later, a very long overdue milestone finally happens. The 1999 CMA Awards take place at the Grand Ole Opry House, and even though Martina has just come off this very successful year, she only has 1 nomination. She gets to sing I Love You on the telecast, and she is up for Female Vocalist of the Year alongside Faith Hill, Jody Messina, Shania Twain, and Trisha Yearwood. She had been nominated twice, previously back in 1996 and 1998. She would lose to Patty Loveless and Trisha Yearwood during those years. She gets to perform on this show, and she wears this gorgeous light blue turquoise 2-piece halter gown, and she looked absolutely stunning and radiant, and she just floated and commanded that stage. Martina's award show performances, they're often so heavy in terms of subject, so it was really great to see her in this lighthearted spirit and kind of just a different dimension to her. Travis Tritt and Marty Rowe from Diamond Rio, they present the award for female vocalists at the CMAs, and they announced Martina McBride's name. She's immediately surrounded in hugs by her husband, and RCA's Joe Galante is there, and her record producer Paul Worley's there by her. You see Shania Twain kind of reaching out to her as Martina makes her way to the stage. And she is obviously very overcome with emotion as she steps up to the microphone to give her speech. And it was such a big moment for country fans who had been cheering her on for almost a decade at that point. The next month, Martina's single, I Love You, that would hit #1 on the country airplay charts, and it stayed there for an impressive 5 weeks. And it should be noted that singles really didn't stay at #1 that long, but during 1999, you had giant records that held the top spot for multiple weeks. Kenny Chesney's How Forever Feels, George Strait with Write This Down, Lone Star, they had an 8-week #1 with Amazed, and Tim McGraw's Something Like That and Please Remember Me spent multiple weeks at the top. Martina's song would end the year as the 24th most played country song of the entire year. And the next single from the Emotion record would be Love's the Only House. This is a song that conveys a powerful message, something that Martina is known for tackling. The album, it quickly went gold after it was released, and this single, it would hit #3 and spin 28 big weeks on the charts. And there's a must-watch ACM Awards performance of Martina singing this song. She just endures so much passion when she sings it. She had the most perfect outfit. Every bit of it was super impressive, and even looking back 20-something years later, it's still such a powerful song. Martina continues to dominate radio, and she's part of the gigantic George Strait Festival tour later that spring in early 2000. She's listed as 3rd on the bill that includes George Strait, Tim McGraw, Kenny Chesney, Leanne Womack, Mark Chestnut, Asleep at the Wheel, and Billy Gilman. In terms of production, the Emotion album has such a different sound than her previous efforts. During a 1999 interview with Country Weekly, Martina talked about the making of the album. Martina says, with any album you put out, you're always nervous about whether it's going to be accepted or not. I know it's probably not the most traditional country album ever, but you know what? I've never really made traditional country albums. So in a way, I don't think it's going to be too shocking for people. Hopefully they expect me to do something different with each album. By the summer of 2000, her 3rd single, There You Are, is released to radio. It is a gorgeous ballad with these soaring vocals. She would perform it later that fall on the CMA Awards with an orchestra, just absolutely stunning. You can also find that song on the movie Where the Heart Is. It's also on that soundtrack. And this song, it would become Martina's very first single to reach the top 15 on the adult contemporary charts. It was also a big hit at country radio, landing at #10. Ever since her second album, The Way That I Am, Martina, she has co-produced all of her records. Martina tells Country Weekly, I was involved with every little detail. Everything from arrangements to the drum sounds to the spacing between each song on the record. I can't imagine doing it any other way. There's no right or wrong way. But for me, producing it is really fun and exciting. Martina was becoming a household name at this point. Of course, she's been a staple on country radio for almost a decade at this point, but she was really starting to become a crossover star. She represented country music so well, and I certainly think she's responsible for bringing in a wider audience to country music. Her music resonates with listeners, and she just became one of the leading faces of the format. And at one point, she was absolutely everywhere, including Kellogg's cereal boxes during a summer promotion. She would land a spot on the 2001 American Music Awards where she performed It's My Time. And I just completely respect the way Martina has handled fame and what comes with it. She's often quoted that she doesn't want to be a celebrity. She just wants to be able to get the music to as many people as possible. And she definitely did that with the Emotion album. And I think if you go back and listen to other albums from that era, this one is timeless in terms of production. It truly encompasses the title Emotion in every way. It's a more quiet record that provides this intimate listening experience, and it is one of the best from Martina McBride. Emotion is certainly one of my favorite records from that time period, and I want to know your memories from that era. What songs do you remember loving and listening to back then? Emotion is just one of those albums that still holds up today, and it is definitely worth checking out. Thank you so much for being here for Across the Country with Amanda. I'll see you in a future episode, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss the latest episode. And of course, you can find me each and every week on Across the Country with Amanda, my syndicated radio show.